of you are your number one asset. I talked to a guy today and he said, I've got a lot of money in life insurance. And I love that question.
Yeah.
It's like, what is a lot of money? And he said something like $2 million. And I said, let me tell you this, my friend, you're worth way more than $2 million. And just paused and let that sink in for a second, because $2 million, is a lot of money. I'm not gonna say it's not, but when you think of your life and you as your number one asset,
right,
and what the value that you bring in the world and your future potential to bring even more, you're worth way more than that.
This is BetterWealth with Caleb Williams. Welcome back to another episode of the BetterWealth Breakdown. We're breaking down ideas, concepts, and thoughts. I always mess that up, but you get the point, from around the world to help you live a more intentional life. And Dan, I first of all have to say we did not mention this, but we are both in the studio with our brand new BetterWealth t-shirts. And if you're interested, let us know. We can see what we can do. It's been, we should have an episode on how not to buy t-shirts, because we've literally done everything wrong, but we have t-shirts, they're comfortable, and I think they're pretty good looking. So anyways, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about something about your number one asset and a bumper sticker.
Yeah, so I was on my way back to the house from a coffee shop today, and there was a home inspection truck, and the tagline on the back said, "Protect your number one asset."
Wow.
And I was like, man, Caleb would love to have seen this, because we talk all the time about you are your number one asset. And yet this home inspection company, or whether it was just an individual, is saying that your house is your number one asset. And in my opinion, there's a lot of things wrong with that statement.
Yeah, totally.
The first being, if Robert Kiyosaki was listening to this, he would say it is not an asset. And why would he say that, Caleb?
Well, because he identifies an asset as anything that puts money back in your pocket. And most of the time, your personal residence is not actually generating cash. And so it's just like you're actually, a lot of times, the house that you pick, you're losing money just because you tend to live in something, and it tends to come with a lot more expenses. So that concept is very much of like a worldly, and this we get this all the time. I worked at a bank. A lot of people are like, your house is your biggest purchase, which transfers into your asset, which actually you believe.
Yeah, and it's like that whole idea again of you are your number one asset. I talked to a guy today, and he said, I've got a lot of money in life insurance. And I love that question.
Yeah.
It's like, what is a lot of money? And he said something like $2 million. And I said, let me tell you this, my friend, you're worth way more than $2 million. And just paused and let that sink in for a second, because $2 million, is a lot of money. I'm not gonna say it's not, but when you think of your life and you as your number one asset,
right, and
what the value that you bring in the world and your future potential to bring even more, you're worth way more than that. And he just kind of sat back and was like, man, I really appreciate that, because nobody is talking like that, of saying like, you need to be thinking about yourself and investing in yourself, and because of all the things that you can provide to your family, to your community, and the things in your life.
Yeah, and I also think this is a good to keep us accountable, and quite frankly, to turn the mirror on you and saying, what in your life are you doing with your time, with your money, with what the conversations that you're having inside your head? What are you doing that's helping you invest in yourself, which is giving you that platform to help you show up more powerfully? And what areas are you like sliding back into that, like the whole worldly concept of like your house is your number one asset, or your 401k is your number one asset? And there's just a lot of things that it's really good. And I wish we had a camera that we used, because I think that would have made an even good video. Is like, everyone's telling you this, and very few people are thinking about money as it relates to, let's not talk about like what the rate of return of your dollars will get. That's important, don't get me wrong, but what is this money going to do? Let's see this money as a tool versus the end game. And I think if we understand that, and I actually think if we understand the definition of an asset, it would just be much more powerful and shape our lives. Anything else that you want to mention off this idea of your number one asset?
Well, and I think what you just said is very key, of that distinction of what is an asset versus a liability, because I think a lot of the time we've been taught that liabilities are assets. And
Yep.
it's just not so. And so especially like cars, people think that cars are an asset. Now they could be, if you have like a collector car that could potentially increase in value, but a lot of times it's costing you money to do that. And I keep using examples of people. This is real world stuff. Somebody called in and they're saying, hey, I'm going to put more money into this real estate property, this rental property, to pay down the mortgage to make it cash flow, because it basically breaks even at this point. And I was like, you just talked about a liability. You're thinking like, yes, long term.
Well, okay, you opened up a can of worms here. So here's how I explain assets and liabilities, because I think we do need to be careful, because I don't want to give you mixed information. So an asset is anything of value that you can sell. So technically, my computer is an asset, the car is an asset, your personal residence is an asset, your retirement account is an asset. Now, not all assets are created equal. For instance, my computer is a depreciating asset. My car depreciates, meaning it gets less and less valuable. My personal residence, this is key, in most cases is going to appreciate. So when people hear like, oh, personal residence might be a bad thing, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to look at opportunity cost of your money. Your personal residence could very well be an appreciating, an asset that goes up in value, but you have to compare that to every single other place in your life. And in most cases, the opportunity cost, if you actually factor in all the time, all the money, all the energy that goes into your mortgage, goes into your house, in most cases, if you say, what if I redirected that into X, Y, or Z, you could maybe get a different result. And I want to be very, very clear that I think home ownership is a good thing, that you should look into that it makes sense in many, many cases. But the other thing that I want to say is we talk a lot about asset-based activities. Now, I'm using a lot of the words assets, and I want people to understand like the real definition, why Robert Kiyosaki says your house is an asset. And I think what we need to be headed towards is an asset-based activity is anything that you do with your time or your money that puts extra money in your pocket. And so I think the takeaway in this is, what can you do today? What can you do next week? What can you do in the next couple of years with your time and your money that can get you closer to the kind of result that you want to live in your life? And going back full circle, who is that number one person that you need to get aligned and make sure that is 100%? I know we've been all over the place. I would love to hear your thoughts, because I want to be able to articulate this in a lot of different ways. So we talked about you being your number one asset. We talked about the definition of a real asset. We talked about why Robert Kiyosaki doesn't think your house is an asset. And we talked about an asset-based activities. And people are so confused. They wonder why they listen to this podcast and this show. So I apologize, but I hope that made sense.
I'm glad I opened that can of worms.
Yeah. Well, I just, I'm like now ultra aware of like, we got to be careful what we're saying, because I very much know that people could go back and be like, well, you said this, but you said this, and this doesn't make sense. I want to make sure I'm very clear and not taken out of context. Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.